The Galactic Council chambers stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian, its vaulted ceilings lost in artificial twilight. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated zones, each atmosphere carefully controlled, each seat designed for alien physiology. The air hummed with translation matrices and the subtle tension that came when predators and prey shared the same space. Ambassador Chen Wei stood at the human podium, her small frame dwarfed by the towering Krillian delegation to her left and the crystalline Vortak collective to her right. She wore simple diplomatic blues, no weapons, no ceremonial armor like the others. To most observers, humans looked almost comically fragile among the gathered representatives. The Hedgemarch of Zephyria, a being whose carapace gleamed with bioluminescent threat displays, raised one of its 4 arms. The matter before us today concerns the human species and their delayed compliance with Galactic Statute 847 Alpha. Chen's translator buzzed softly in her ear. She'd been expecting this for months. Ever since humanity had been granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council, certain factions had been looking for ways to put Earth's upstart species in their place. The statute clearly mandates, continued the Hedgemarch, its voice carrying the authority of 10,000 conquered worlds, that all member species must contribute military assets to the Council's peacekeeping forces. Humanity has been granted extensions, exceptions, and accommodations for nearly 2 standard years. The Council's patience grows thin. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The predatory Keth delegation clicked their mandibles in what Chen recognized as approval. The aquatic Nereid representatives pulsed with shifting colors that her briefings had identified as smug satisfaction. Chen activated her speaking platform. The chamber's ambient noise dampened as translation protocols kicked in, broadcasting her words in dozens of languages simultaneously. Honored representatives, she began, her voice steady despite the weight of 47 civilizations' attention. Humanity acknowledges the importance of Statute 847 Alpha. We have not been delaying compliance out of reluctance or disrespect. The Vortak collective's crystalline forms chimed in harmonic discord. Their primary speaker, a towering formation of living crystal, projected its thoughts directly into the translation matrix. Then, explain your species' continued absence from mandatory military quotas. Earth maintains no standing space navy. Your orbital defenses are primitive. Your contribution to galactic security remains 0. Chen felt the familiar weight of humanity's position in the galactic community. They were newcomers, barely 2 centuries into space travel, while the youngest council member species had been exploring the stars for over a millennium. Earth's technology was crude by galactic standards, their military assets laughable compared to the vast fleets that patrolled the galaxy's spiral arms. We require additional time to meet the statute's requirements, Chen said carefully. Human military doctrine and technology operate on principles that may not translate directly to galactic peacekeeping standards. A sound erupted from the Keth delegation that the translator rendered as derisive laughter. Warchief Scar, his chitinous bulk scarred by countless battles, leaned forward on his speaking platform. Principles? Your species wages war with chemical propellants and metal projectiles. Your fastest vessels require months to cross a single star system. What principles could possibly require 2 years to adapt? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Chen had been dreading this moment, but she'd also been preparing for it. The briefing files in her neural implant contained information that most of the council representatives would find disturbing. Warchief Scar raises valid points about human technology, Chen acknowledged. Our weapons are indeed primitive by galactic standards. Our ships are slow. Our defensive capabilities are limited. She paused, watching as several delegations relaxed slightly, satisfied by what seemed like an admission of weakness. However, she continued, the delay in our compliance stems not from technological limitations, but from the unique nature of human military doctrine. Specifically, our approach to warfare and our historical relationship with conflict resolution. The Hedgemarch's bioluminescence shifted to what Chen's briefings indicated was impatience. Elaborate, human. The council grows weary of cryptic explanations. Chen took a breath. This was the moment that would either secure humanity's place in the galactic community or potentially mark them as a species to be watched with extreme caution. For the past 18 months, human military strategists and xenopsychology experts have been working with our diplomatic corps to develop what we call the Galactic Integration Protocol. The purpose of this protocol is to ensure that human military contributions to Council operations remain proportionate and appropriate to galactic peacekeeping standards. She activated a holographic display above her podium. Star charts appeared, showing human-controlled space, a tiny cluster of 12 star systems in the galaxy's outer rim. Humanity controls a minuscule portion of galactic territory. Our population numbers less than 40 billion across all our colonies. By any reasonable metric, our contribution to galactic peacekeeping forces should be minimal. The hologram shifted, showing comparative fleet sizes. Human vessels appeared as tiny specks next to the massive dreadnoughts of established council species. This presents a problem, Chen continued, because human military doctrine has evolved under very specific circumstances that do not exist elsewhere in the galaxy. Warchief Scar's mandibles clicked with what might have been curiosity. What circumstances could be unique to one species? War is war. Territory is territory. Resources are resources. Resource scarcity, Chen said simply. For our entire evolutionary history, humanity has been confined to a single world. Every war, every conflict, every territorial dispute has occurred on the same planet, competing for the same limited resources. This has created certain adaptations in our approach to warfare. The chamber fell silent. Several species had evolved on single worlds, though most had achieved interstellar travel much earlier in their development. The implications of Chen's statement weren't immediately clear to most representatives. The Nereid delegation's prime speaker, a graceful being whose bioluminescent skin had been cycling through diplomatic neutrality, suddenly flashed the deep crimson that indicated alarm. As an aquatic species that had faced similar resource constraints, they seemed to grasp the implications faster than the others. "You're suggesting," the Nereid speaker said, its translated voice carrying undertones of growing unease, "that human military doctrine evolved under zero-sum conditions? That your species' approach to warfare assumes total competition for finite resources?" "More than that," Chen replied. "Human warfare evolved under the assumption that the enemy would never stop fighting until they achieved total victory or suffered total defeat. Surrender was often temporary. Treaties were frequently broken. The only reliable path to peace was the complete elimination of the opposing side's capacity to wage war." The Vortak collective's harmonics shifted to discordant frequencies that the translator couldn't properly render. Their primary speaker projected a thought that came through as raw mathematical concepts: concern. Exponential growth of destructive efficiency over time. Question: rate of technological development in warfare applications. Chen nodded grimly. The Vortak collective raises an important point. Human military technology has indeed developed rapidly, particularly in the last several centuries. However, this development has occurred in isolation, without the moderating influence of galactic civilization. She activated another holographic display, this one showing a timeline of human technological development. The other species in the chamber watched as the display traced humanity's progress from bronze weapons to nuclear arsenals in a span that represented mere moments on the galactic timescale. "The concern that has necessitated our integration protocol," Chen explained, "is that human military assets, while primitive by galactic standards, were designed with assumptions about warfare that do not apply to galactic peacekeeping operations." The Hedgemarch's bioluminescence had shifted from impatience to something that the briefing materials suggested was unease. "Explain these assumptions, human." Chen felt the weight of the moment. The next few minutes would determine not just humanity's role in galactic civilization, but potentially how the other species would view them for generations to come. "Human military assets are not designed for peacekeeping," she said quietly. "They are not designed for proportional response. They are not designed for territorial control or resource management or any of the objectives that Council peacekeeping forces typically address." The silence in the chamber was absolute now. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed muted. "Human military assets," Chen continued, "are designed for the complete elimination of existential threats. Our weapons, our tactics, our entire strategic framework operates on the assumption that anything capable of threatening humanity's survival must be destroyed utterly and permanently." Warchief Scar's mandibles had stopped clicking. The Keth were renowned throughout the galaxy for their martial prowess, their honor-bound warrior culture, their sophisticated understanding of military strategy. But something in the human ambassador's tone seemed to give even the warchief pause. When human strategists began analyzing typical council peacekeeping scenarios, Chen went on, we encountered a fundamental problem. Our military doctrine contains no provision for measured response. No concept of proportional force. No framework for achieving limited objectives. The holographic display above her podium shifted again, showing tactical simulations. The other species watched as human strategic models played out, each one ending not with territorial control or resource capture, but with the complete annihilation of opposing forces. This is why humanity has required additional time to achieve compliance with Statute 847 Alpha, Chen said. We have been working to develop new technologies, new tactics, and new strategic frameworks that would allow human forces to participate in galactic peacekeeping without. She paused, choosing her words carefully, exceeding the scope of typical operations. The Nereid speaker's bioluminescence had deepened to a shade of red that indicated profound alarm. Ambassador Chen, it said slowly, are you suggesting that humanity is incapable of limited warfare? Chen met the Nereid's gaze across the vast chamber. I am suggesting that humanity has never had a reason to develop limited warfare capabilities. Every conflict in our history has been a struggle for survival, resources, or territorial control on a world where defeat meant extinction. The chamber erupted in chaotic harmonics as species try to process this information through their translation matrices. The mathematical probability constructs that passed for Vortex communication became so complex that the translators simply gave up, displaying error messages instead of attempting to convey meaning. Through the noise, Warchief Scar's voice cut like a blade. You claim your species cannot wage limited war? This is absurd. Any civilized species understands proportional response. Chen activated her speaking platform again, and the chamber's noise-dampening systems gradually restored order. Warchief Scar, with respect, the concept of proportional response requires an understanding of what constitutes appropriate proportion. This understanding typically develops through contact with other civilizations, through trade relationships, through diplomatic frameworks that create alternatives to total warfare. She gestured to the assembled representatives. Every species in this chamber achieved interstellar travel while interacting with other species. Your concepts of limited warfare, proportional response, and strategic restraint developed through necessity. You had neighbors who could retaliate, trading partners who could impose economic consequences, alliance structures that created mutual obligations. The holographic display showed Earth, alone in its solar system, the only world bearing intelligent life for dozens of light years in any direction. Humanity developed in isolation, Chen said. We had no neighbors. No trading partners. No possibility of external retaliation or economic consequences. For our entire history, every conflict was between groups that would continue to share the same small world forever. The implications of this began to sink in across the chamber. Species that had evolved with interstellar neighbors had always understood that excessive force against one opponent might provoke intervention from others. They had developed complex frameworks for limited conflict because unlimited conflict invited unlimited retaliation. This isolation shaped human military doctrine in ways that are difficult to explain, Chen continued. Our strategies assume total commitment because anything less than total commitment historically resulted in prolonged conflict and greater overall casualties. The hedge march's bioluminescence had shifted to patterns that indicated deep thought. You are describing a species with no concept of strategic restraint. We are describing a species whose concept of strategic restraint is fundamentally different, Chen corrected. Human strategic restraint focuses on preventing conflicts from beginning rather than limiting their scope once they start. We invest enormous resources in diplomacy, economic integration, and conflict prevention specifically because we understand how destructive unrestricted warfare can be. She activated another display, this one showing human diplomatic and economic efforts since joining the galactic community. The numbers were impressive. Humanity had negotiated more trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and mutual assistance pacts in 2 years than most species managed in decades. But, once a conflict passes the threshold where peaceful resolution becomes impossible, Chen said quietly, human doctrine calls for overwhelming application of force to achieve decisive victory as quickly as possible. This minimizes casualties and prevents prolonged conflict, but it also means that human military responses tend to be. She searched for the right word, comprehensive. The Vortex collective's harmonics had returned to normal frequencies, but their mathematical communications now carried undertones that the translator rendered as, query, definition of comprehensive in human military context. Request, specific examples. Chen hesitated. The examples she could provide would probably alarm the entire chamber. But, the integration protocol required full disclosure if it was going to work. Recent human military operations provide useful examples, she said finally. 3 months ago, a human merchant vessel was attacked by pirates in the Kepler 442 system. The pirates destroyed the merchant ship and killed all 47 crew members. The chamber's attention focused completely on Chen. Piracy was a common problem throughout the galaxy, handled by various local security forces and, when necessary, council peacekeeping forces. Standard response involved pursuing the pirates, recovering stolen goods, and either capturing or destroying the pirate vessels involved. Human security forces responded to this attack, Chen continued. Within 72 hours, they had eliminated not only the pirates who attacked our vessel, but the entire pirate organization they belonged to. All 17 of their ships were destroyed. Their base of operations was obliterated. Their supply network was dismantled. Their financial infrastructure was seized and distributed as compensation to previous victims. War Chief Scar leaned forward with what might have been professional interest. This sounds like efficient military action. What concerns could this possibly raise? The pirate organization had been operating in that sector for over 30 years, Chen said. Council peacekeeping forces had conducted dozens of operations against them over the past decade, successfully limiting their activities and protecting civilian shipping. The human response eliminated them entirely in 3 days. The silence that followed was profound. Several species maintained sophisticated military forces specifically because complete elimination of opponents was considered unnecessarily destructive and destabilizing. The galaxy's complex web of relationships depended on the understanding that conflict could be limited, controlled, and resolved without existential consequences. This illustrates the challenge we face with Statute 847 Alpha, Chen continued. Human military assets are not designed for the kind of measured, proportional responses that characterize council peacekeeping operations. We do not have weapons that wound rather than kill. We do not have tactics that disable rather than destroy. We do not have strategic frameworks that seek to control rather than eliminate. The Nereid speaker's bioluminescence had stabilized in patterns that indicated careful consideration rather than alarm. Ambassador Chen, surely your species must have developed some capacity for graduated response. Police forces, riot control, internal security operations? We have, Chen acknowledged. Our integration protocol has focused extensively on adapting domestic security methods to galactic peacekeeping requirements. However, these adaptations require significant technological development and tactical innovation. Equipment designed for human physiology must be modified for dozens of different species. Tactics developed for terrestrial conditions must be adapted for space-based operations. Strategic frameworks based on single-planet politics must be expanded to account for interstellar implications. She activated a final holographic display, showing the technical specifications of humanity's proposed contribution to Council peacekeeping forces. The equipment looked strange to most observers: weapons that fired restraining nets instead of projectiles, ships designed for boarding and capture rather than destruction, communication systems optimized for negotiation rather than coordination of fire support. The integration protocol represents humanity's commitment to fulfilling our obligations under Statute 847 Alpha while adapting our military capabilities to galactic standards, Chen said. We believe that our unique historical experience, properly channeled, can contribute significantly to galactic security. But, this contribution requires careful preparation to ensure it remains appropriate to peacekeeping objectives. The Hedgemarch's bioluminescence had shifted to patterns that indicated grudging respect. Human Ambassador, your species' honesty regarding these limitations is noteworthy. However, the Council requires concrete timelines for compliance. How long do you estimate your integration protocol will require? Chen took a deep breath. This was the moment that would determine humanity's immediate future in the galactic community. We estimate 6 additional months to complete development of appropriate technologies and tactics, she said. However, we propose to begin limited participation in Council operations immediately, working alongside experienced peacekeeping forces to gain practical experience while our specialists continue their development work. The chamber buzzed with translation activity as species conferred among themselves. The proposal was unprecedented. No species had ever requested supervised integration into Council forces. But, then, no species had ever been quite as candid about the nature of their military limitations. War Chief Scar spoke first. The Keth hegemony finds merit in this proposal. A species that understands its own tactical limitations and seeks to address them responsibly demonstrates wisdom that exceeds mere technical capability. The Vortak collective's response came as pure mathematics that the translator rendered as agreement. Probability analysis indicates human transparency regarding military doctrine exceeds galactic norms. Recommendation: supervised integration protocols approved. One by one, the other species added their voices to the discussion. Some expressed concern about humanity's admitted lack of proportional response capabilities. Others praised their honesty and systematic approach to addressing the problem. But, gradually, a consensus emerged. The Hedge March raised its primary arm, calling for formal order. The Council recognizes humanity's unique circumstances and approves their request for supervised integration into peacekeeping forces, contingent upon completion of their integration protocol within the specified timeframe. Chen felt a wave of relief wash over her. Humanity would remain in the galactic community. They would have time to adapt their military capabilities to galactic standards. Most importantly, they would have opportunities to prove that their approach to warfare, properly channeled, could contribute to galactic security rather than threatening it. But, as the formal voting proceeded and the session moved toward adjournment, Chen couldn't shake a nagging feeling that the other species still didn't fully understand what humanity was offering to contribute to galactic civilization. The integration protocol had been designed to create safeguards and limitations, but it hadn't fundamentally changed human military doctrine. When the galaxy eventually faced a threat that required more than measured responses and proportional force, Chen wondered if the other species would be prepared for humanity's answer. The session ended with formal approval of humanity's proposal, but Chen knew that the real test was yet to come. The integration protocol would give humanity time to develop appropriate peacekeeping capabilities, but it would also give the galaxy time to understand what humans meant when they spoke of settling their obligations. As she gathered her materials and prepared to leave the chamber, Chen made a mental note to ensure that the next progress report would include more detailed explanations of human military capabilities. The galaxy deserved to understand exactly what they were accepting into their peacekeeping forces. After all, honesty had gotten humanity this far. It seemed unwise to start holding back information now, especially when that information might prove critical to galactic security in the months and years ahead. The cosmos, Chen reflected, was about to discover what happened when humanity finally settled their obligations. She just hoped everyone would be prepared for the consequences. The Meridian Station orbited the pulsar designated PSR 1847, its massive ring structure rotating slowly against the backdrop of violent cosmic radiation. The station served as the primary coordination hub for Sector 7 peacekeeping operations, home to 12 different species working together to maintain stability across 43 star systems. Commander Zexhai of the Keth hegemony stood in the command center, her chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the station's artificial lighting. Around her, holographic displays showed the current deployment of Council peacekeeping forces across the sector. Everything appeared normal, routine even, until her communications officer announced an incoming priority transmission. "Commander," the young Nereid called out, his bioluminescence flashing the urgent patterns that indicated maximum priority traffic, "we're receiving a distress call from the Vega 7 mining colony. They report unknown vessels in their system, aggressive posture, demanding tribute payments." Zexhai's mandibles clicked in mild annoyance. Piracy was an ongoing problem in the outer systems, but it was rarely serious enough to warrant emergency response protocols. The mining colonies typically dealt with tribute demands by negotiating reduced payments until peacekeeping forces could arrive to mediate. "Classification?" she asked, moving toward the main tactical display. 3 medium cruisers, configuration unknown. They've disabled the colony's orbital defense platforms and are threatening bombardment if tribute demands aren't met within 6 hours. That changed things. Disabling defensive infrastructure indicated a level of organization and capability that went beyond typical pirate harassment. Zexhai activated the sector-wide communication network, calling up the deployment status of available peacekeeping assets. The display showed her options. 2 Keth patrol squadrons were conducting routine security sweeps in adjacent systems. A Vortak diplomatic vessel was en route to mediate a trade dispute. 3 Nereid frigates were completing a search and rescue operation near the sector boundary. And 1 human vessel, the UES Determination, was conducting what the deployment log listed as supervised training exercises in the Beta Centauri system. Zexhai studied the tactical situation. Under normal circumstances, she would dispatch one of the Keth squadrons to Vega 7. Standard procedure involved approaching the unknown vessels, establishing communication, and negotiating a peaceful resolution. If negotiation failed, peacekeeping forces would disable the pirate vessels and take their crews into custody for processing by the appropriate authorities. But the human vessel was actually closer to Vega 7 than either Keth squadron. According to the deployment records, the Determination had been conducting integration exercises with a mixed crew of human and Council personnel, learning to adapt human military assets to standard peacekeeping protocols. This might be an excellent opportunity to observe human peacekeeping capabilities under real conditions. Communications, Zexai called out, establish contact with the UES Determination. I want to speak with their commanding officer immediately. The main display flickered and resolved into the image of Captain Sarah Chen, the human commander of the Determination. Chen appeared to be human standard middle-aged, with the kind of calm demeanor that suggested extensive military experience. Behind her, Zexai could see both human and alien personnel working at various control stations. Commander Zexai, Chen said, her translated voice carrying formal respect, how can the Determination assist you? Captain Chen, we have a situation developing at Vega 7 colony. Unknown vessels are demanding tribute and threatening bombardment. Your vessel is the closest peacekeeping asset to their location. Are you prepared to respond? Chen's expression didn't change, but Zexai noticed something shift in the background activity on the human ship. Personnel who had been moving at normal speed suddenly became more focused, more purposeful, though they maintained the same professional demeanor. We are prepared to respond, Commander. However, I should clarify our current operational status. This is our first real deployment under the integration protocol. My crew includes Council observers who are here to evaluate our adherence to standard peacekeeping procedures. Understood, Captain. What is your estimated transit time to Vega 7? 4 hours at maximum sustainable velocity. We can arrive well within the deadline established by the unknown vessels. Zexai nodded approvingly. Human ships were indeed fast, even if their technology was primitive by galactic standards. Very good. Proceed to Vega 7 and resolve the situation according to standard peacekeeping protocols. I'll monitor your progress from here. Acknowledged, Commander. Determination out. The communication ended, and Zexai turned her attention to other sector business. The response to Vega 7 should be routine enough. The human crew had been training for exactly this kind of scenario for months, and they had experienced Council personnel aboard to provide guidance. What Zexai didn't see was the conversation that began aboard the Determination immediately after the communication ended. Captain Chen turned to face the mixed human and alien crew on her bridge. You all heard the situation. Unknown vessels at Vega 7, demanding tribute, threatening bombardment. Standard piracy scenario. Lieutenant Commander Urix, a Vortak Collective member serving as the ship's Council observer, projected its thoughts into the communication matrix. Query, Response Protocol Selection. Recommendation, Standard Approach Pattern Alpha. Diplomatic Contact. Negotiated Resolution. Chen nodded. That's what the manual calls for, yes. Communications, I want a full tactical analysis of the Vega 7 system transmitted to my station. Navigation, plot our approach vector according to Council peacekeeping guidelines. Weapons, prepare non-lethal suppression systems. The bridge crew responded with professional efficiency, but Lieutenant Commander Urix noticed something unusual. The human personnel were moving with a precision and focus that exceeded their performance during training exercises. More concerning, they were implementing additional procedures that weren't part of standard peacekeeping protocols. Observation, human crew implementing non-standard preparation procedures. Query, purpose of additional tactical scans. Chen glanced at the crystalline Vortak representative. Standard procedure, Commander Urix. We're gathering comprehensive intelligence about the tactical situation before committing to a specific approach. But what Chen didn't explain was that the comprehensive intelligence included detailed analysis of the unknown vessel's defensive capabilities, crew complement estimates, supply status, potential escape routes, and structural weak points. The human crew wasn't just preparing for peaceful negotiation, they were preparing for every possible contingency, including several that weren't covered in Council peacekeeping manuals. 3 hours later, the UES Determination dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Vega 7 system. The tactical display immediately populated with sensor data from the colony and the 3 unknown vessels orbiting it. "Captain," the tactical officer called out, "I'm reading 3 ships of unknown configuration, mass approximately 800,000 tons each. They've established a blockade formation around the colony. Defensive platforms are offline but not destroyed, looks like they were disabled with some kind of electromagnetic pulse." Chen studied the tactical display. The unknown vessels were positioned to control all shipping lanes in and out of the system. Their formation suggested military training rather than typical pirate opportunism. Most concerning, their ships were significantly larger than standard pirate vessels, indicating either corporate backing or foreign military involvement. "Any response to standard identification requests?" she asked. "Negative, Captain. They're maintaining communication silence except for their demands to the colony." Lieutenant Commander Urix projected its concern into the ship's communication matrix. Observation: unknown vessels demonstrate sophisticated tactical deployment. Recommendation: immediate diplomatic contact to establish peaceful dialogue. "Agreed," Chen said. "Communications, broadcast standard council identification and request immediate conference with the unknown vessel's commanding officer." The communication went out on all frequencies, clearly identifying the determination as a council peacekeeping vessel and requesting dialogue according to established galactic law. For several minutes, there was no response. Then, the tactical officer announced, "Captain, I'm detecting weapons lock from all 3 unknown vessels. They're targeting our engines and navigation systems." The situation had just escalated beyond standard piracy. Threatening council peacekeeping forces was a serious crime under galactic law, one that typically indicated organized military action rather than opportunistic theft. Chen felt the familiar clarity that came with the transition from peacekeeping to combat operations. Around her, the human crew shifted subtly into what their training called threat response mode. Their movements became more precise, their communications more clipped, their focus absolutely concentrated on the tactical situation. "Status of the colony?" she asked. 43,000 civilians, minimal defensive capability. The unknown vessels have positioned themselves to threaten the main population center if they attempt to evacuate. Chen studied the tactical display, her mind automatically calculating firing solutions, approach vectors, and damage estimates. The unknown vessels had made a critical error in their positioning. They'd optimized their formation to threaten the colony, but, in doing so, they'd created vulnerabilities that standard peacekeeping forces wouldn't normally exploit. "Lieutenant Commander Urix," she said carefully, "according to Council peacekeeping protocols, how should we respond to unknown vessels that refuse diplomatic contact and threaten Council forces?" The Vortak representative's response came as a complex mathematical construct that the translator rendered as standard escalation protocol, warning broadcast. Demonstration of capability. Graduated response increasing until compliance achieved. And if graduated response fails to achieve compliance? Ultimate authority: disable threatening vessels. Minimize casualties. Preserve civilian population. Chen nodded. That authorization was all she needed. Very well. Implement standard escalation protocol. She turned to face her crew. "Communications, broadcast final warning to unknown vessels. They have 10 minutes to stand down and withdraw from the system, or we will take action to protect the civilian population." The warning went out, clear and unambiguous. The unknown vessel's response was equally clear. They increased their weapons lock and began charging their main batteries. "Captain," the tactical officer called out, "unknown vessels are preparing to open fire." Chen looked around her bridge one more time. The council personnel were watching with professional interest, expecting to observe a textbook example of graduated peacekeeping response. The human crew were waiting for orders with the kind of focused intensity that came from months of training for exactly this scenario. "All stations," Chen said quietly, "implement Protocol 7. Lieutenant Commander Urix had no way of knowing that Protocol 7 wasn't part of the Council peacekeeping manual. It was part of the Human Integration Protocol, designed specifically for situations where standard peacekeeping escalation had failed and civilian populations were under immediate threat. What happened next would later be studied by military strategists throughout the galaxy. The determination didn't approach the unknown vessels according to standard peacekeeping doctrine. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the closest ship at maximum velocity, launching what appeared to be a full spread of missiles. Lieutenant Commander Urix projected alarm into the communication matrix. Error: human vessel implementing non-standard attack pattern. Query: authorization for lethal force. But the missiles weren't following standard attack profiles either. Instead of targeting the unknown vessel's weapons or engines, they spread out in a complex pattern that surrounded the ship completely. When they detonated, they didn't explode, they released clouds of metallic particles that interfered with sensors and communications. Within seconds, all three unknown vessels found themselves blind and deaf, unable to coordinate their response or even communicate with each other. The Determination used this advantage to approach each vessel in turn, but, instead of destroying them, it deployed what the tactical display identified as boarding parties. Small craft launched from the human ship and attached themselves to the unknown vessel's airlocks. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Urix transmitted, query, purpose of boarding action. Standard protocol calls for disabled vessels to surrender. Standard protocol assumes the unknown vessels are willing to surrender, Chen replied calmly. These ships refused diplomatic contact and threatened Council forces. We're implementing direct crew neutralization to prevent civilian casualties. What she didn't explain was that direct crew neutralization was a human military concept that didn't exist in Council peacekeeping doctrine. Instead of disabling ships and waiting for surrender, human forces were trained to capture hostile vessels by overwhelming their crews directly. The boarding actions that followed were swift and efficient. Human Marines, supported by non-lethal weapons specifically designed for shipboard combat, moved through the unknown vessels with methodical precision. Within 30 minutes, all three ships had been captured, their crews detained, and their threat to the colony eliminated. The entire operation had taken less than an hour from first contact to complete resolution. Commander Zexai, Chen reported back to Meridian Station, situation at Vega 7 has been resolved. 3 unknown vessels have been captured intact, crews detained for questioning. Colony population is secure. Zexai's mandibles clicked with what might have been surprise. Captured intact? What was the disposition of the hostile crews? 47 individuals taken into custody without casualties. Ships are fully operational and ready for intelligence analysis. We're standing by for prisoner transfer protocols. The communication ended, leaving Zexai staring at the tactical reports from Vega 7. According to the data, the human vessel had resolved a serious piracy threat without firing a single lethal shot, without destroying any equipment, and without endangering the civilian population. But the method they'd used was unlike anything in Council peacekeeping doctrine. Instead of graduated escalation and negotiated resolution, they'd implemented what appeared to be a perfectly executed military capture operation. Aboard the Determination, Lieutenant Commander Urix was trying to understand what it had just observed. Query: classification of tactical procedure. Request: documentation of Protocol 7. Captain Chen looked at the crystalline representative thoughtfully. Protocol 7 is part of our integration procedures, developed specifically for situations where standard peacekeeping escalation fails to protect civilian populations. It's designed to achieve rapid resolution while minimizing casualties. Observation: human tactical doctrine demonstrates efficiency beyond Council norms. Query: rate of implementation for similar scenarios. This is our first real deployment, Chen admitted. But our simulations suggest that similar results should be achievable in most comparable situations. What Chen didn't mention was that Protocol 7 was actually one of their more restrained options. The integration protocol included several other tactical frameworks, designed for progressively more serious threats. If the unknown vessels had actually opened fire on civilians, the human response would have been considerably more decisive. As the Determination began the process of transferring prisoners and captured vessels to Council authorities, Chen wondered how the galaxy would react to humanity's approach to peacekeeping. The integration protocol had been designed to adapt human military capabilities to galactic standards, but the underlying doctrine remained fundamentally human. The galaxy was about to discover that when humans spoke of settling their obligations, they meant it literally. Threats to civilian populations would be eliminated swiftly and completely, regardless of the complexity involved in achieving that elimination. Chen just hoped that the Council would understand the difference between human efficiency and human aggression. Because if the galaxy continued to face threats that required more than diplomatic solutions, humanity was prepared to provide considerably more decisive responses than Protocol 7. The cosmos, she reflected, was still learning what happened when humanity took responsibility for galactic security. Today's lesson had been relatively gentle. The next one might not be. The interrogation facilities aboard Meridian Station had been designed to accommodate dozens of different species, each with their own physiological and psychological requirements. The 47 prisoners from the Vega 7 incident presented an interesting challenge. They weren't any species that appeared in Council databases. Commander Zexai observed the questioning process through reinforced observation windows, her mandibles clicking softly as she processed what she was learning. The prisoners called themselves the Helix Confederation, claimed to represent a coalition of species from beyond the galactic rim, and insisted that their actions at Vega 7 had been entirely legal under their own territorial laws. More concerning was their attitude toward Council authority. Unlike typical pirates or raiders, who usually showed some recognition of galactic law even when they violated it, the Helix prisoners seemed genuinely confused by the concept of Council jurisdiction. "They don't recognize our authority," reported interrogation specialist Vorth, a slender nereid whose bioluminescent patterns indicated professional frustration. "They keep asking why local primitives are questioning them about lawful taxation of their own territory." Zexai's attention sharpened. Their own territory? Vega 7 has been a Council protectorate for over 60 years. That's what makes this interesting. According to their navigation records, the Helix Confederation has been conducting taxation operations throughout what they call the Frontier Zone for the past 18 months. They have detailed charts showing 47 star systems that they claim as sovereign Helix territory. The implications were staggering. If the Helix Confederation was claiming sovereignty over systems under Council protection, this wasn't piracy, it was an undeclared war. "Show me those charts," Zexai ordered. The holographic display materialized above the interrogation room table, showing a three-dimensional map of local space. The claimed Helix territory encompassed not just the Outer Rim systems, but several core Council worlds and major shipping lanes. According to their charts, the Helix Confederation considered the entire local cluster to be unclaimed frontier space, ripe for colonization and resource extraction. "Commander," Vorth continued, "there's something else. The prisoners keep asking about the native military response to their taxation operations. They seem genuinely surprised that Council forces were able to capture them." "What do they mean by native military response?" "As far as we can determine, they expected resistance from primitive local forces but nothing that could seriously threaten their operations. They described their mission at Vega 7 as routine resource collection from an undefended colony." Zexai studied the tactical reports from the Vega 7 operation. The human vessel Determination had captured 3 military cruisers without suffering any damage or casualties. But, according to the prisoners' statements, those cruisers represented advanced Helix military technology, designed to outclass anything they expected to encounter in the Frontier Zone. "What's their assessment of the Determination's capabilities?" Vortha's bioluminescent patterns shifted to indicate confusion mixed with concern. "That's where things get strange, Commander. They insist that the vessel that captured them couldn't possibly be of local origin. They believe it must represent an unknown species with advanced stealth technology." "They think the Determination was using stealth technology?" "More than that. They think it was specifically designed to defeat Helix countermeasures. According to their tactical analysis, no primitive frontier species could have penetrated their sensor screens or boarding defenses." Zexai felt a chill of understanding. The Helix Confederation had been conducting operations in Council space for over a year, collecting intelligence on local military capabilities. They'd planned their expansion based on the assumption that Council forces would be unable to mount effective resistance. But their intelligence had been gathered before humanity joined the Council peacekeeping forces. "I need to see the tactical records from their previous operations," she said. "All of them." The data that emerged over the next several hours painted a disturbing picture. The Helix Confederation had conducted dozens of taxation operations throughout the Outer Rim, each one designed to test Council response capabilities. They'd attacked isolated colonies, intercepted merchant vessels, and probed the defenses of minor worlds. In every case, Council peacekeeping forces had responded according to standard protocols. Diplomatic contact, graduated escalation, negotiated resolution, or limited military action to disable hostile vessels. The Helix forces had studied these responses carefully, developing countermeasures and tactical doctrines specifically designed to exploit what they saw as Council reluctance to use decisive force. They were preparing for a full-scale invasion, Zexai realized. All these raids were reconnaissance operations. Vortha's pattern shifted to indicate alarm. "Commander, if that's true, then the 3 vessels at Vega 7 were just the beginning. The prisoners keep referring to primary fleet elements and main territorial integration operations. Zexhai activated the priority communication system, establishing direct contact with Council headquarters. This situation had escalated far beyond routine piracy. The galaxy was facing an invasion by an unknown species that had specifically prepared to exploit Council peacekeeping doctrine. But, before the communication could connect, alarms began sounding throughout Meridian Station. The tactical display lit up with dozens of new contacts, appearing throughout Sector 7 simultaneously. "Commander," the station's tactical officer called out, "we're detecting massive fleet movements throughout the sector. Multiple unknown vessels, configurations consistent with the ships captured at Vega 7. The main display showed the scope of the situation. 43 star systems were reporting the arrival of unknown fleets. Mining colonies, research stations, and civilian populations throughout the sector were suddenly faced with demands for immediate surrender to Helix authority. This wasn't a raid or a probe, it was a coordinated invasion designed to capture the entire sector in a single overwhelming operation. Status of available peacekeeping forces? Zexhai demanded. 2 Keth squadrons in the Rigel system, 3 Nereid frigates near the sector boundary, 1 Vortak diplomatic vessel, and... The tactical officer paused, the human vessel Determination, still at Vega 7. Against a coordinated invasion by dozens of military vessels, the available Council forces were completely inadequate. Under normal circumstances, Zexhai would immediately call for reinforcements from adjacent sectors and attempt to coordinate a fighting withdrawal to protect civilian populations. But, the human vessel had just demonstrated capabilities that the Helix forces hadn't anticipated. If Captain Shen's crew could repeat their performance at Vega 7 on a larger scale. "Communications, establish immediate contact with the Determination," Zexhai ordered. "Priority Alpha authorization." The display flickered and resolved into Captain Shen's image. Behind her, Zexhai could see the human bridge crew working with the kind of intense focus she'd observed during the Vega 7 operation. "Commander Zexhai," Shen said without preamble, "we're tracking the fleet movements throughout the sector. Are you declaring a Code 7 emergency?" Code 7 was the Council's highest level of military alert, reserved for existential threats to galactic civilization. Zexhai had never expected to use it during her career. "Affirmative, Captain. Code 7 emergency is now in effect. We're facing coordinated invasion by the Helix Confederation. Intelligence suggests they've been planning this operation for over a year, specifically accounting for standard Council response capabilities." Shen's expression didn't change, but Zexhai noticed something shift in the background activity on the human bridge. Personnel who had been moving at crisis tempo suddenly became even more focused, even more purposeful. "Understood, Commander. What are your orders?" Zexhai paused. Standard doctrine called for defensive coordination, protection of civilian populations, and strategic withdrawal until reinforcements could arrive. But, standard doctrine had been developed assuming threats that could be contained through conventional peacekeeping methods. "Captain," she said carefully, "the Helix forces have studied our standard response protocols. They've designed their invasion specifically to exploit our reluctance to use decisive force. Standard peacekeeping methods will not be effective against this threat. Are you authorizing unrestricted response, Commander?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Unrestricted response wasn't part of Council peacekeeping doctrine. It meant abandoning graduated escalation, abandoning negotiated resolution, abandoning all the careful limitations that prevented peacekeeping operations from becoming total wars. But 43 star systems were under attack, millions of civilians were in immediate danger, and the enemy had specifically planned their invasion to exploit Council restraint. "Authorization confirmed," Zexhai said. "Unrestricted response to protect civilian populations. Acknowledged. Commander, I recommend you coordinate evacuation of non-essential personnel from Meridian Station. This sector is about to become very dangerous for anyone not directly involved in military operations." The communication ended, leaving Zexhai staring at the tactical display. She just authorized a human military vessel to respond without restrictions to an invasion force. Part of her wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake. The answer came 18 hours later. Aboard the Determination, Captain Shen stood before her assembled crew. The ship's complement included not just humans, but several Council species who had been serving as observers and advisors. All of them were about to witness something that had never been seen in galactic peacekeeping operations. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored colleagues, Chen began, we have been authorized to implement unrestricted response to protect civilian populations throughout Sector 7. This authorization supersedes all previous limitations on human military operations. Lieutenant Commander Urix projected its concern into the communication matrix. Query: definition of unrestricted response in human military doctrine. Chen looked at the crystalline representative thoughtfully. Commander Urix, human unrestricted response means that we will eliminate the Helix invasion force completely and permanently. Not disable, not deter, not negotiate with, eliminate. Clarification request: definition of eliminate in this context. Every Helix vessel in the sector will be destroyed. Every Helix military installation will be obliterated. Every Helix commander will be captured or killed. The invasion force will cease to exist as a military entity. The bridge fell silent as the non-human crew members processed this information. The concept of completely eliminating an enemy force went against everything in Council peacekeeping doctrine. Captain, asked the Nereid communications officer, what about prisoners? Surrender negotiations? The possibility of diplomatic resolution? Chen turned to face the full bridge crew. The Helix Confederation has refused diplomatic contact, attacked civilian populations, and launched an invasion designed to exploit our peaceful intentions. Under human military doctrine, they have classified themselves as an existential threat that must be eliminated. She activated the ship's tactical display, showing the locations of Helix forces throughout the sector. We have been authorized to implement Protocol 0. This is not a peacekeeping operation. This is not a rescue mission. This is warfare, and we will conduct it according to human standards. Lieutenant Commander Urix's response came as pure mathematical concepts that the translators struggled to render. Concern. Query: probability of excessive collateral damage. Request: limitations on destructive capacity. There will be no collateral damage, Chen said simply. Human military doctrine prioritizes precision above all other considerations. Every Helix vessel will be destroyed, but every civilian will be protected. She turned to her tactical officer. Implementation timeline? 72 hours for complete elimination of Helix forces in the sector, Captain. No civilian casualties, no damage to Council installations, no interference with non-military operations. The non-human crew members stared at each other in something approaching disbelief. The idea that a single vessel could eliminate dozens of military ships in 3 days while avoiding any collateral damage seemed impossible. Begin implementation, Chen ordered. What followed would later be studied by military historians throughout the galaxy as the most perfect example of precision warfare ever recorded. The determination didn't attack the Helix forces randomly or engage them in conventional fleet actions. Instead, it implemented a systematic elimination protocol that targeted each enemy vessel according to optimal tactical efficiency. The first targets were the Helix command ships, eliminated using long-range missile strikes that penetrated their defenses and destroyed their primary control systems. Without coordination, the remaining Helix forces were unable to mount organized resistance. The second phase targeted Helix vessels that posed direct threats to civilian populations. Boarding parties captured these ships intact, securing them for intelligence analysis while protecting the populations they had been threatening. The final phase eliminated the remaining Helix forces using a combination of direct assault, electronic warfare, and tactical maneuvering that prevented any enemy vessel from escaping or calling for reinforcements. Throughout the entire operation, the determination maintained perfect precision. Every shot hit its intended target. Every boarding action succeeded without casualties. Every civilian population remained completely protected. At the end of 72 hours, the Helix invasion force had ceased to exist. 43 star systems were secure, millions of civilians were safe, and Council authority had been restored throughout the sector. The galaxy was beginning to understand what humans meant when they spoke of settling their obligations. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the elimination of the Helix invasion force. Representatives from all 47 member species gathered in the Great Chamber, but the atmosphere was markedly different from the routine diplomatic proceedings that normally characterized council meetings. Fear, respect, and uncertainty filled the vast space like a tangible presence. Ambassador Chen Wei stood at the human podium once again, but this time she wasn't defending humanity's delayed compliance with military service obligations. This time, she was answering questions about what one council member had termed the most devastating display of military efficiency in recorded galactic history. The Hedgemarch of Zephyria rose from its designated platform, bioluminescent displays cycling through patterns that indicated deep concern. Ambassador Chen, the Council requires a complete accounting of human military actions in Sector 7. The elimination of 43 Helix vessels in 72 hours has raised questions that demand immediate answers. Chen activated her speaking platform, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation matrices. Honored Hedgemarch, humanity's actions in Sector 7 were conducted under Code 7 emergency authorization, with explicit approval for unrestricted response to protect civilian populations. Every action taken by the UES determination was legally authorized and, tactically necessary. A sound erupted from the Keth delegation that translated as skeptical growling. War Chief Scar, his massive form bristling with ceremonial weapons, leaned forward aggressively. 43 military vessels eliminated by a single ship? This strains credibility beyond any reasonable assessment. What weapons did your vessel employ? What defensive systems? What support infrastructure? Shen had been expecting this question. The technical specifications of human military capabilities had been carefully classified throughout the integration protocol, revealed only on a need-to-know basis. But, the Sector 7 operation had demonstrated capabilities that could no longer be concealed. War Chief Scar, the UES determination employed standard human military assets, adapted for space-based operations through our Integration Protocol Development Program. Standard human military assets, the War Chief repeated, his mandibles clicking with what might have been disbelief. Ambassador, the Helix vessels were equipped with military-grade armor, energy shields, and defensive systems comparable to Council peacekeeping forces. No single vessel should have been able to penetrate their defenses, much less destroy them without taking significant damage. Chen looked around the chamber, seeing similar expressions of confusion and concern on representatives from dozens of species. The time for diplomatic evasion was over. The Helix vessels were indeed equipped with sophisticated defensive systems, she acknowledged. However, these systems were designed to counter the types of weapons and tactics typically employed by Council peacekeeping forces. Human military assets operate according to different principles. The Vorthak collective's harmonics shifted to frequencies that indicated intense curiosity. Their primary speaker projected mathematical concepts that the translator rendered as query, specific nature of human weapons technology. Request, technical specifications for analysis. Chen activated a holographic display above her podium. The technical readout that appeared showed weapon specifications that most of the chamber's occupants found incomprehensible. Human military doctrine emphasizes what we call kinetic superiority, she explained. Rather than relying on energy-based weapons that can be deflected by shields, human weapons accelerate physical projectiles to velocities that make defensive countermeasures irrelevant. The silence that followed was profound. Energy shields had been the foundation of military defense systems for thousands of years. The idea of weapons that simply ignored such defenses was genuinely shocking to most galactic civilizations. The projectiles used by human kinetic weapons, Chen continued, achieve velocities approaching significant fractions of light speed. At such velocities, the kinetic energy involved exceeds the defensive capacity of any known shield technology. War Chief Scar's voice carried an undertone that the translator couldn't properly convey. You're describing weapons that can penetrate any defense simply through brute force application of physics. That's essentially correct, Chen confirmed. Human weapons technology developed under the assumption that any defense could eventually be overcome through sufficient application of kinetic energy. This assumption proved accurate during the Sector 7 operation. The Nereid delegation's bioluminescence had shifted to patterns indicating extreme alarm. Their primary speaker's voice trembled with barely controlled emotion. Ambassador Chen, such weapons represent a fundamental threat to the balance of power that has maintained galactic stability for millennia. How can the Council coexist with military technology that renders all defensive measures obsolete? Chen had been dreading this moment throughout the integration protocol development. The question of technological compatibility had always been central to humanity's integration into galactic civilization. The Nereid delegation raises valid concerns about military balance, she said carefully. However, it's important to understand that human kinetic weapons technology exists as a response to specific historical circumstances. She activated another holographic display, this one showing comparative technological development across various species. Most galactic civilizations developed military technology in competition with other species using similar technological frameworks. Energy weapons, energy shields, electronic warfare, all of these evolved as countermeasures to each other within a consistent technological paradigm. The display shifted to show Earth's isolated development path. Humanity developed in technological isolation. Our weapons technology evolved not in response to alien threats, but in competition with other humans using identical technological bases. This created a unique evolutionary pressure toward maximum efficiency rather than technological diversity. The mathematical concepts projected by the Vortak collective became so complex that the translators displayed error messages. Finally, their primary speaker managed to convey understanding, human technology optimized for conflicts against identical opponents. Result, maximum efficiency within consistent technological framework. Exactly, Chen confirmed. Human military technology represents the endpoint of optimization within a single technological paradigm. It's not necessarily superior to galactic technology, it's simply designed according to different principles. The Hedgemarch's bioluminescence had shifted to patterns that indicated thoughtful consideration rather than alarm. This explanation addresses the technological question, but raises others. If human weapons can penetrate any defense, what prevents humanity from conquering the galaxy? The question that everyone had been avoiding hung in the air like a challenge. Chen felt the weight of 47 civilizations' attention, all waiting to understand whether humanity represented salvation or existential threat. Two factors, she said simply. First, human military doctrine prioritizes precision above all other considerations. Our weapons may be capable of penetrating any defense, but they can also be targeted with absolute accuracy. This allows us to eliminate military threats without causing collateral damage. She activated another display, showing the tactical records from Sector 7. During the elimination of the Helix invasion force, human weapons achieved a precision rate of 99.97%. Every shot hit its intended target. No civilian installations were damaged. No non-military vessels were threatened. Several representatives leaned forward with what appeared to be professional interest. The concept of weapons that combine overwhelming power with perfect precision was almost as alien as the weapons themselves. The second factor, Chen continued, is more fundamental to human psychology and culture. Our species evolved under conditions where excessive force inevitably led to mutually assured destruction. This created strong cultural and strategic preferences for solutions that eliminate threats without creating new ones. The chamber buzzed with translation activity as species attempted to process this concept through their own cultural frameworks. Human military doctrine, Chen explained, is designed to achieve what we call decisive termination, the complete elimination of threats in ways that prevent retaliation, escalation, or long-term instability. We don't conquer because conquest creates ongoing obligations and potential resistance. We eliminate specific threats and, then, return to peaceful activities. Warchief Scar's mandibles clicked in what might have been understanding. You're describing military doctrine designed to end conflicts permanently rather than winning them temporarily. That's an excellent way to phrase it, Chen agreed. Human military operations are designed to resolve threats completely, leaving no remaining capacity for future aggression, but also no desire for revenge or retaliation. The Nereid speaker's bioluminescence had stabilized in patterns that indicated cautious acceptance. This explains the precision of your operations in Sector 7. You weren't just eliminating the Helix invasion force, you were ensuring that the Helix Confederation would have no capacity to mount future operations. Correct. Our intelligence analysis indicates that the forces eliminated in Sector 7 represented the Helix Confederation's primary military assets. They no longer possessed the capability to threaten Council territory or civilian populations. The implications of this began to sink in across the chamber. Humanity hadn't just won a battle, they'd ended a war so completely that the enemy no longer existed as a military entity. The Hedgemarch raised its primary arm, calling for formal attention. Ambassador Chen, the Council acknowledges humanity's successful defense of Sector 7 and the protection of civilian populations. However, the capabilities demonstrated during this operation raise questions about humanity's long-term role in galactic civilization. Chen nodded. She'd been expecting this conversation since the integration protocol began. What questions specifically concern the Council? The question of proportionality, the Hedgemarch said. Human military capabilities appear to exceed anything previously seen in galactic history. How can the Council ensure that such capabilities remain dedicated to peaceful purposes? Chen looked around the chamber, seeing the mixture of fear and hope on representatives' faces. This was the moment that would determine humanity's future relationship with galactic civilization. The same way the Council has always ensured peaceful cooperation among species with differing capabilities, she said. Through mutual respect, shared interests, and recognition that every species contributes something valuable to galactic civilization. She activated a final holographic display, showing the current state of galactic security. The elimination of the Helix threat demonstrates that humanity's military capabilities can be used to protect rather than threaten galactic civilization. Our integration protocol was designed specifically to ensure that human military assets serve Council objectives rather than human territorial ambitions. The display showed projected deployment scenarios for human peacekeeping forces, each one designed to eliminate specific types of threats while maintaining absolute protection for civilian populations. Humanity seeks partnership, not dominance, Chen concluded. Our military capabilities are offered in service to galactic security, subject to Council oversight and dedicated to the protection of all member species. The chamber fell silent as representatives considered this offer. Humanity was proposing to serve as galactic civilization's ultimate deterrent against existential threats, while remaining subject to Council authority and committed to peaceful cooperation. It was an offer that was simultaneously reassuring and terrifying. The Vortak Collective's response came as pure mathematical certainty, probability analysis, human military partnership essential for galactic security. Risk assessment, acceptable given demonstrated restraint and precision. War Chief Scar's voice carried grudging respect. The Keth hegemony acknowledges human military superiority and supports their continued integration into Council peacekeeping forces. One by one, the other species added their voices to the discussion. Some expressed concern about the balance of power. Others praised humanity's restraint and precision. But, gradually, a consensus emerged. The Hedgemarch raised its primary arm again. The Council recognizes humanity's unique military capabilities and approves their continued service in galactic peacekeeping operations, subject to ongoing evaluation and Council oversight. Chen felt a wave of relief wash over her. Humanity would remain part of galactic civilization, their military capabilities recognized as an asset rather than a threat. But, as the formal voting proceeded, she couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy still didn't fully understand what they were accepting. The Helix Confederation had been a relatively minor threat, dealt with using only a fraction of human military capability. When the galaxy eventually faced something truly dangerous, something that threatened the survival of galactic civilization itself, the other species would discover what humans really meant when they spoke of decisive termination. The cosmos was about to learn that humanity's settlement of their obligations was just beginning. And the next lesson might be considerably more dramatic than anything they'd seen so far. The crisis began 18 months after the Helix Confederation incident, emerging from a region of space that galactic civilization had avoided for over 3,000 years. The Void Nebula stretched across 47 light-years of twisted spacetime, its interior hidden behind layers of exotic matter that defied conventional sensors and navigation systems. Ancient records spoke of expeditions that had ventured into the nebula and never returned, of signals that emerged from its depths speaking of impossible geometries and technologies that violated the fundamental laws of physics. For millennia, the Galactic Council had simply designated the Void Nebula as off-limits and focused their attention on the vast expanses of normal space that offered plenty of room for expansion and exploration. But, on a Tuesday that would later be remembered as the day galactic civilization almost ended, something emerged from the Void Nebula that changed everything. Admiral Krishon of the Council Defense Forces stood in the primary command center of Citadel Station, the massive fortress that served as headquarters for galactic military operations. Around her, holographic displays showed the scope of a crisis that defied every assumption about space combat and military technology. "Status report," she commanded, her Keth physiology bristling with the aggressive alertness that came with existential threats. 47 star systems under attack simultaneously, reported her tactical coordinator, a Vortak Collective member whose crystalline form was cycling through mathematical concepts too complex for translation. "Unknown vessels, technology unlike anything in our databases. Complete communication blackout from all affected systems." The main tactical display showed the scope of the catastrophe. A wave of attacks had emerged from the Void Nebula, spreading through Council space with methodical precision. Every system they touched went completely silent, all communications ceasing, all defensive installations presumably destroyed.
What do we know about the attacking force? Krishan asked.
Minimal data, admitted her intelligence chief, a Nereid whose bioluminescence patterns indicated profound uncertainty. The few automated distress signals we received before communication blackouts suggest vessels of enormous size, using weapons technology that our forces couldn't identify or counter.
Krishan studied the tactical situation with growing alarm.
In her 30 years of military service, she had never seen anything like this. The attacking force wasn't conquering territory or demanding surrender, it was simply eliminating everything in its path with absolute efficiency.
Estimated size of the invasion fleet? Unknown. Our deep space sensors can't penetrate whatever technology they're using for concealment.
But, based on the rate of system elimination, we estimate hundreds of vessels, each one significantly larger than our heaviest dreadnoughts.
The implications were staggering.
If the invasion force continued at its current pace, they would reach the core Council worlds within 6 months. And, nothing in the galactic military arsenal seemed capable of stopping them.
Send immediate recall orders to all peacekeeping forces, Krishan commanded. Full mobilization of all member species' military assets.
And, establish priority contact with the human vessel Determination. The Determination had become something of a legend in Council circles since the Helix incident. Captain Chen's crew had been conducting advanced training operations throughout the galaxy, refining their integration protocol and developing new tactical frameworks for human participation in Council operations. But, more importantly, they represented the only military force that had demonstrated capabilities beyond standard galactic technology.
The communication display flickered and resolved into Captain Chen's image.
Behind her, Krishan could see the familiar sight of the human bridge crew working with the focused intensity that seemed to characterize their species during crisis situations.
Admiral Krishan, Chen said without preamble, we're tracking the situation throughout the affected sectors. Are you declaring Code 7 emergency status? Affirmative. Code 7 emergency is now in effect.
Captain, we're facing an invasion by unknown forces using technology that our fleets can't counter. Initial engagements resulted in complete loss of Council vessels with no apparent damage to enemy forces. Chen's expression didn't change, but Krishan noticed that the background activity on the human bridge had shifted to what she now recognized as maximum alert status.
What intelligence do we have on enemy capabilities? Chen asked. Minimal.
Our forces haven't survived long enough to gather detailed tactical data. We know the enemy vessels are larger than anything in Council fleets, their weapons penetrate our shields and armor without apparent effort, and their defensive systems seem impervious to our weapons.
Chen nodded grimly.
Admiral, I need to be completely clear about something. If these enemy forces represent technology beyond standard galactic capabilities, humanity's response may exceed the scope of previous Council operations.
Krishan felt a chill of understanding. During the Helix incident, human forces had demonstrated capabilities that went far beyond anything in Council military doctrine.
But, Chen's tone suggested that the Helix operation had actually been a restrained response compared to what humanity was capable of when truly threatened.
Captain, what are you telling me?
I'm telling you that humanity's integration protocol was designed to adapt human military assets to peacekeeping operations against opponents using comparable technology. If we're facing an existential threat to galactic civilization, we may need to implement capabilities that go beyond those limitations. The weight of Chen's words settled over the command center like a physical presence. Krishan understood that humanity was offering to escalate their military response beyond anything previously seen in galactic warfare. What would such an escalation involve, she asked carefully.
Complete elimination of the invasion force, Admiral.
Not just tactical defeat or strategic containment, but absolute eradication of their capacity to threaten galactic civilization. This would involve weapons and tactics that humanity has never used in Council operations. Krishan looked around her command center, seeing the faces of personnel from dozens of species all waiting for her decision. The choice was stark: accept humanity's offer of escalated response, knowing that it might fundamentally change the nature of galactic military operations, or attempt to defend against an apparently unstoppable invasion using conventional methods that had already proven inadequate. Captain Chen, she said formally, I am authorizing unlimited military response to eliminate the invasion threat. All previous limitations on human military operations are hereby suspended.
Acknowledged, Admiral.
We'll need 48 hours to reconfigure our systems and coordinate with human military command. During that time, I recommend that Council forces implement defensive withdrawals to protect civilian populations.
Understood. Captain, one question: what should we expect from humanity's unlimited response?
Chen looked directly into the camera, her expression carrying a weight that Krishan had never seen before. You should expect the complete elimination of everything that emerged from the Void Nebula.
Admiral, when humans settle their obligations without limitations, we don't leave any possibility of future threats.
The communication ended, leaving Krishan staring at displays showing the relentless advance of an invasion force that had already eliminated 47 star systems without apparent loss. What she didn't see were the conversations that began immediately aboard the Determination and at human military facilities throughout Council space.
Full Protocol Zero implementation, Captain Chen announced to her crew. This is not a peacekeeping operation. This is species survival warfare, and we will conduct it according to human total war doctrine. Lieutenant Commander Orcs, the Vortak observer who had witnessed human capabilities since the integration protocol began, projected its concern into the communication matrix. Query: definition of total war doctrine in human military framework. Chen turned to face the assembled crew, both human and alien. Total war doctrine means that every aspect of human military capability will be directed toward eliminating the enemy completely. Not just their invasion force, but their entire civilization if necessary. The non-human crew members stared at each other in growing alarm. The concept of eliminating entire civilizations went beyond anything in galactic military history. Captain, asked the Nereid communications officer, surely you don't mean literally destroying their entire species?
I mean exactly that, Chen said quietly.
The enemy has demonstrated technology capable of eliminating galactic civilization. Under human total war doctrine, such capability represents an existential threat that must be eliminated permanently and completely.
She activated the ship's strategic display, showing tactical projections that the non-human crew had never seen before. Human military doctrine recognizes only two possible outcomes to existential warfare: complete victory or species extinction.
There is no middle ground. Lieutenant Commander Urix's mathematical projections became so complex that the translation systems simply gave up. Finally, it managed to convey horror.
Understanding: human military capability exceeds all previous estimates. Query: probability of collateral damage to galactic civilization. 0 probability of collateral damage, Chen said with absolute certainty. Human total war doctrine prioritizes precision above all other considerations.
The enemy will be eliminated completely, but galactic civilization will be protected absolutely. Over the next 48 hours, humanity implemented the largest military mobilization in their species' history. Vessels that had never been seen outside human space began appearing throughout Council territory. Weapons that had existed only in theoretical frameworks were brought online.
Military assets that had been considered too dangerous for deployment were activated and prepared for combat. The scale of humanity's military capability became apparent as Council forces observed the preparations. What they had seen during the Helix incident represented less than 1% of human military capacity. The integration protocol had been designed not to adapt human weapons to galactic standards, but to limit them to levels that wouldn't alarm galactic civilization. Now, with unlimited authorization and